Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. I'm a criminal psychologist and I run a business that enables me to bring knowledge and learning to everyone, not just those who are studying at colleges and universities. And I do this by producing a range of blogs, vlogs and free online courses. But I do also run some slightly more in-depth courses which are both available face-to-face and online. You don't need any previous qualifications to learn with me, and there are several different subjects available. So after this video, why don't you head on over to my website, have a look at the courses that are available and see if any are of interest to you. This particular video is looking at Susan Smith. Many thanks to Business Cat on YouTube who suggested her for a psychological analysis. Susan Lee Smith is an American woman who was convicted of killing her own two children. 3-year-old Michael and 14-month Alexander were killed in 1994 by her strapping them into a car and pushing the car into the lake where the boys drowned. At the time of recording this video, she would be 48 years old and is reportedly eligible for parole in 2024. At the time of the offence, she said that she'd been carjacked by a black male and that he took the car with children inside. She lived this lie for 9 days before confessing. Women who murder are much rarer than their male counterparts, and as a society, we tend to be much more shocked when women kill. And the reason for this is because women are traditionally seen as the ones who care and nurture for people, especially their own children. Women who kill are not only committing a horrific crime, but they're breaking the traditionally held stereotype of women as carers and nurturers. Therefore, we tend to be a bit more shocked and want to know how a woman could possibly kill, especially killing her own children. Those of you that have seen any psychological analysis of other offenders that I've done know that I begin by taking a look at the upbringing of the person. There are usually always clues or events that are worthy of note in a person's earlier life. And Susan Smith is no different. There's a lot of trauma and sadness in her childhood. The more I looked into this case, the more layers that there were. Searches on Google indicated that some of the results had been removed due to privacy requests. This means that individuals or groups of individuals had made an application to have information withheld from internet search engines. This isn't really that surprising though. In a case like this, many people will have searched key terms for information about the family and perhaps the family just wanted some privacy. Susan Smith was born in 1971 in South Carolina and she's the youngest of 3 children. Her parents had a turbulent marriage and they divorced when Susan was 7 years old. One particular source reported that Susan was very close to her father and that he was an alcoholic. The parents, Harry and Linda, would argue and would become violent. He would become violent with her. He allegedly repeatedly accused Linda of cheating on him and they went on and were divorced. 5 weeks after their divorce, her father committed suicide. He's reported to have held a gun between his legs and shot himself in his upper body. However, he didn't die instantly and he called 911. However, it was too late then to save his life. Also, within weeks of the divorce and the suicide, her mother moved in with a man named Bev Russell. Susan is reported to have been a sad and distant child. She would have been too young to understand the grief and the thoughts and feelings that she may have had. I'm going to assume that her mother wasn't as affected by the death as the children possibly were. I think it would probably be safe to say that she wouldn't have supported the children's emotional needs during that time as well as she may have done. Her 2 brothers were older and they may have already developed some emotional intelligence to perhaps deal with these events a little bit better. As I've said in a previous video, early childhood trauma doesn't excuse or explain engaging in offending in crime. There are many people who experience abuse, neglect, sexual abuse or rape, and they never go on to commit a crime. However, many of the cases that I've analysed have experienced traumatic events in their upbringing. This made me then wonder how her two elder brothers had behaved in their life and if they'd ever been in trouble or spoke out about anything. I wasn't able to find much information at all on these. This is probably due to the application for privacy restrictions on internet searches. After using several search engines though, I did discover that the eldest brother was born before Linda married Harry. One source said that Susan and Scotty were frightened by the behaviour of her father. However, I can only assume that this was speculative because only one source reported that piece of information. I also discovered that when the eldest, Michael, was young, that he'd attempted to commit suicide by hanging himself and that he'd received therapeutic treatment for that. And that would have been when Susan was 4 years of age. At the age of 13, Susan Smith attempted suicide. Those who knew her saw her as a friendly, outgoing person. In high school, she was a member of several groups and she volunteered within her community. She even received an award as the friendliest female in her final year of high school. Outwardly, she appeared to be a fun and outgoing person. However, inside, she was most likely very depressed and managed to hide how she felt. This is a young woman who had difficulty processing her emotions. She would have been traumatised by the death of her father and possibly confused by the sudden lifestyle changes that occurred around that time as well. Even before this, she'd witnessed problem drinking and aggressive behaviour between her parents. Those who would normally be seen as protective figures are possibly then viewed as a source of upset and abandonment for Susan. Susan Smith was sexually assaulted at the age of 16 by Bev, who was her mother's new husband. According to the legal papers, Russell had fondled her breast, he'd engaged in open-mouth kissing with her, and he'd placed her hand on his genitals. She did tell the mother about that, and she also reported it to social services at the time. As a result, Bev temporarily moved out of the family home. However, after a few family counselling sessions, Bev returned home and there were no consequences for that behaviour. Susan was chastised by her family for making the sexual abuse a public affair, and her mum appeared to be more concerned with the fact the family would be subjected to public embarrassment than protecting her daughter. Unfortunately then, with Bev back in the house, the sexual molestation continued. In her senior year of high school, Susan turned to a school counsellor for help. Social services were once again contacted, but Susan refused to press charges and the matter was swiftly concealed and covered up by protection orders by Bev and the family. Linda, Susan's mum, told a reporter that the incident had been blown out of all proportion. She even added that it was Bev's money who was funding Susan's trial. As a psychologist, this seems to me like the tipping point for Susan. We know that children learn through observing others. We learn how to behave and how to respond to others and how to act within society by those around us. A young child saw her parents fight, sometimes physically. Then she saw her father end his own life rather than dealing with emotions and rebuilding his life. She saw her mother swiftly move on to marry and move in with another man. This man then sexually abused her, and when she turned to her mother for help and protection, she was met with anger that she'd spoken out and that she'd embarrassed the family. She was let down by both her family and the authorities. She was made to feel as though she was wrong for speaking out against these incidents. So she learned to hide her feelings. Bev learned that sexually abusing her was okay and was allowed to continue to live there. This reinforced his behaviour, and so it's no doubt that that continued. We know from studies within psychology that sexual abuse at an early age can often result in higher rates of major depression, of conduct disorder, and suicidal behaviours. It can also result in psychological disorders and maladaptive behaviours being developed to cope. At this point, some of you may be feeling a little bit sorry for Susan Smith. But let me remind you, she killed 2 innocent children by drowning them and then lied about it for 9 days. The reason I've gone over all of this background information is to show you how her maladaptive behaviours have been developed over time. She developed coping mechanisms to deal with her experiences in life. Her early experiences with sexual behaviour wasn't a positive introduction to intimacy. During her trial, her brother spoke, saying that Susan seemed happy and all of her friends loved her. Her brother went on to say that she loved being with people. At that point, I see a young lady who's tried hard to please people and to be accepted and liked. She developed an outward personality that was really fun and outgoing, a person that other people wanted to be around. She learned that it doesn't matter how she feels on the inside, as long as she behaved in ways that other people liked. These early years are probably when she learned that she can get people to like her. For Susan Smith, it became normal to suppress her own emotions. It became normal to ignore how she was feeling. On a subconscious level, though, that need for protection still existed within her. She'd been let down by her father, her stepfather, and her mother. At the age of 17 or 18, in her final high school year, she began working at a store and was reportedly having sexual relations with 3 men at that time. There was a married man, a younger co-worker, and her stepfather. When the married man called the relationship off, she made another suicide attempt. For Susan, this was another rejection by an older man who initially provided her with some comfort and stability. It's also reported that she became pregnant and had an abortion. Her brother says that she'd not given him any indication that anything was wrong before she tried to commit suicide. Just after that, she began a relationship with the man that she was to go on and marry, called David. She was already pregnant when they married. Susan was 19 years old at the time. 11 days before they got married, David's brother died. The pair moved into David's house with his parents. However, his father attempted suicide and his mother moved to a different city. And this was probably because of the grief and the strain that they both felt over the loss of David's brother, their son. By that point in her life, that kind of rejection and abandonment had become somewhat normal to Susan. At first, they comforted each other. However, before long, the strain did begin to show in their relationship. They split up several times, accusing each other of cheating in the relationship. Susan became depressed because of David's attention towards other women. Becoming attracted to an older man and wanting a serious relationship at such the young age that she was is somewhat normal for a person who's experienced rape or sexual abuse at an earlier age. This fatherly figure becomes a very attractive thought and offers some stability and protection for her. From a psychological perspective, Susan isn't able to view sexual relationships as the loving and warm, intimate embrace that others see it as. In her life, she's learned that sex can be used to get what you want. It can be given and taken away at will. She's learned that it doesn't require an emotional connection, emotional bond between two people, and it can be used in destructive ways. Susan and David split up, and Susan struggled financially. Regardless of their broken marriage, both David and Susan were good, attentive and caring parents who seemed to enjoy their children. Scotty, who is Susan's brother, said that she always had a loving, caring nature as a mother, and he never even seen her raise her voice to the children. She moved jobs after that and became employed as a bookkeeper. She met her boss's son, Tom, and started a relationship with him. He ended that relationship writing her a letter about how nice girls shouldn't sleep with married men because he'd saw her kissing another woman's husband in a hot tub at a party they were at. However, during this time, she continued to sleep with her ex-husband, her boss, who was Tom's father, and her stepfather. In fact, it's been reported that she was still sleeping with Bev weeks before the boy's murder. In some sort of a frenzied attempt to keep the relationship with Tom, she told him about her relationship with her stepfather. She probably hoped that he'd feel sorry for her, but he didn't. She told him then about sleeping with his father, and she warned him that details of that might leak out. But he was so shocked by this information, he said that they would never be together. In a psychological analysis, I wouldn't normally include so many details about the offender's life and the episodes within it. However, in this case, I really wanted you to have a solid understanding of how desperate Susan Smith had become. I do hope that this doesn't come across as a regurgitated statement of what she did. I'm including all of this information because it's important to her psychological makeup and her characteristic way of thinking. Each event and tragedy in her life just added another layer of despair. All her life, she'd watched out for and took care of her own needs. She learned that sex was a tool to be used in manipulation. She learned that others would abandon her, and she worked tirelessly to please people and to be liked. This was mostly to ensure, though, that she got what she wanted out of these people. Throughout a number of Susan Smith's relationships, we can see evidence of her trying to gain sympathy from other people. This was certainly evident when she tried to tell Tom about her father-in-law and then his father. It was clear that she wanted others to see her the way that she saw herself, as an unwilling victim helplessly propelled along in these various situations. Susan Smith was clearly in a state of desperation on the day that she killed her children. She strapped the two boys into their car seats. Then she drove to a lake and put the car into drive and watched the car roll into water. She then ran to a nearby house and claimed that a black man had carjacked her and drove off with the children inside. She lived out this lie for 9 days before telling the truth. Just take a look at this media footage of the news interviewing her.
Involved for them, and that they are being taken care of, and that they are safe, and that they will return home safely.
I want to say to my baby that your mama loves you so much, and your daddy and his whole family love you so much, and you guys have got to be strong, because you are. I just know, I just feel in my heart that you're okay, but you got to take care.
You can see the lack of emotion. She makes the right noises, however her facial movements don't match the emotions that she's trying to convey at that time. There is a popular belief that she killed her children so she could stay with Tom. However, Susan Smith denies this. However, the way that she denies this reveals more of her psychological makeup and characteristic ways of thinking. I will speak more about that shortly. After she admitted to killing her 2 young children, she claims that she intended it to be a murder-suicide. She said that she told the story that she did because, in her own words, I don't know how to tell people who loved Michael and Alex that they would never see them again. I didn't want to hurt them. She reached out to her ex-husband with an I'm sorry letter. However, she's sorry for herself. She's not sorry that she killed them. In the letter, she reportedly complains that her feelings are being overshadowed by everybody else's grief. This is a very narcissistic and self-centered claim. There is evidence that she exhibits narcissistic traits. Those who have a narcissistic personality are characterised as having an inflated sense of their own self-importance. They have a deep need for admiration and the attention of other people. Those with narcissistic traits usually have difficulty maintaining relationships, and they have a lack of empathy for other people. However, despite this, they can have a vulnerable or fragile self-esteem. Despite this evidence, her defence psychiatrist said that she had a diagnosis of dependent personality disorder. This condition is characterised as having a psychological dependence on others. They rely on others and they depend on other people to meet their needs both emotionally and physically, and therefore struggle to be completely independent. People with this condition allow or require others to assume responsibility for many areas of their life. They agree to things that they feel are wrong or that they dislike to avoid being alone or losing somebody's support. Whilst there is some evidence of this in the way that Susan Smith appears to need to be in a relationship or even several relationships at the same time, she did also exhibit extreme behaviour in response to the man that she was dating ending the relationship. However, other aspects of her life don't appear to be compatible with that idea. In high school, Susan Smith was a fun, lively type of person. She was able to live a life that outwardly appeared to be happy and confident. Even her brother spoke out in her defence, saying that she was a kind and caring mother, and around the times of her suicide attempts, it appeared as though nothing at all was wrong. A person with dependent personality disorder would act in ways that caused those who knew her to make comments about how she was always looking for reassurance and lacked confidence, or was always focused on getting or maintaining a relationship. However, this doesn't seem to be the case with Susan Smith's behaviour. In the beginning of her jail term, she was placed on suicide watch. During her time in jail, she's been disciplined a number of times for self-mutilating and drug use. She also had sex with 2 male guards on separate occasions. Officials who worked at the jail have described her as narcissistic and somebody who thrives off the attention that's given to her by the media. Her previous behaviour also shows evidence of narcissism. However, some of her behaviour is characteristic of another condition known as borderline personality disorder. It's my own personal view that she has a very complicated psychiatric diagnosis which encompasses a number of conditions. Those with borderline personality disorder have an intense fear of abandonment, even going to extreme measures to avoid real or imagined separation or rejection. They demonstrate impulsivity and risky behaviour such as gambling, reckless driving, unsafe sex, spending sprees, binge eating, or drug abuse. They have a pattern of unstable but intense relationships. They make suicidal threats or behaviour or self-injury, often in response to fear of separation or rejection. There can be periods of stress-related paranoia and loss of contact with reality, which can last anything from a few minutes to a few hours to a few days, and they can have ongoing feelings of emptiness. While some of these traits are similar to dependent personality disorder, they encompass more emotional and irrational behaviours, rather than being defined by anxiety, fear, and an inability to be independent. From all of the information that I've read about Susan Smith and her life, I believe it would be more appropriate to suggest that she shows some traits of borderline personality disorder with evidence of narcissistic traits. For example, Susan wrote to a reporter about the motives and feelings of her conviction. She wrote, "Mr. Carhill, I am not the monster society thinks I am. I am far from it. It has been hard to listen to lie after lie and not be able to defend myself. It's frustrating, to say the least." And that is a very narcissistic comment. Her main concern is how people see her. Her main frustration is not being able to defend herself. There's no sense in that statement of remorse or regret over killing both her children. She continues with the letter, writing, "The thing that hurts me the most is that people think that I hurt my children in order to be with a man. That is so far from the truth. There was no motive, and it was not a planned event. I was not in my right mind." And it may well have been a case that she planned to kill herself as well. In her own mind, she was possibly planning some extreme action to avoid real or imagined rejection. She was certainly behaving impulsively and made a decision probably without thinking of the consequences. One source said that as well as writing to her family, she sometimes wrote letters to her 2 dead sons. She said that she spends a lot of time weeping and talking to pictures of her sons. But one source said that she just cries rivers and that she's worried about breaking down too much and being put back on suicide watch. And that infers that she's less concerned about the death of her 2 children and more concerned with the repercussions that may be imposed on her for crying too much. Of course, I can make all of the speculations that I want to, but the only one who truly knows what was going on in her head that day is Susan. There's always going to be disorders and mental health conditions that we can apply to offenders in retrospect when looking at their behaviours. However, the fact is, this woman strapped her 2 innocent children into car seats and drove the car into the lake. She'd always been a loving and caring mum towards the children, and she'd taken really good care of them. She may well have intended to take her own life at the time, but at some point she got out of her car and decided to lie about it for 9 days rather than going to get some immediate help for her sons. Susan Smith clearly wasn't thinking in a rational way that evening. The rejection by Tom was clearly a contributing factor to her state of mind, but I don't personally believe that she actually thought she could be with Tom if she killed her children. However, the ending of that relationship had a significant impact on her state of mind on that particular day. Her ways of thinking and the decisions that she took were the result of years of emotional turmoil and abuse. I do hope that you found this psychological analysis of Susan Smith interesting and that you've learned something new from it. It makes a big difference to me if you like the videos to leave me a like. If you can suggest improvements or want to leave me any comments about it, write in the comments section. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.